Okay, I think we're live. I'm waiting for it to come up on my phone just to make sure. Okay, it looks like it's a little bit of a delay. Okay, I trust that we're live with a little bit of a delay. Thanks for joining us, everyone, for episode 1 of Ask Us Anything Analytics. We're joined today with Jacqui Moore from Cleartelligence. Jacqui, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got started on analytics?
Sure. Yeah. I am currently a data viz and analytics technical lead at Cleartelligence. I've been doing consulting for a few years now. And then really how I got started in analytics was similar to the same way that I think a lot of people do, is you're making reports in Excel and trying to figure out how to manage the fact that there's a limited volume of data that you can handle. And then I got a Tableau license, and the rest is really history. That kind of was the gateway to me learning everything else that I've learned about data engineering and databases, and all really started because of that.
So you really more started in Tableau than Excel, huh? Wow,
Yeah, yeah.
that's pretty cool because my journey definitely started in Excel. I think most people kind of start out in Excel, but that's really neat that you got started in Tableau right away. Did you find Tableau hard to learn or confusing at first?
I didn't. I thought it was really, really easy to learn. And that might be because I had not been using Excel for as long. So I think that that's a bigger gap to cross than if you're, you know, just kind of natively learning to speak this language of Tableau, or with the drag and drop and visual analytics, and seeing what you're analyzing as you're analyzing it, rather than kind of waiting until the end.
Totally, totally. So, just a quick introduction from my end. So, I've been working in data and analytics since about 2008. I 100% got started in Excel. Manager came to me with a stack of reports and said, "Hey, I need these every Friday." And as she's showing me these reports, I'm kind of just like, maybe we should try and automate this. Or maybe it was like after I did it manually like 2 times, I was like, it's the same mouse clicks every single time. Let's try and automate this. So I got started with data automation right away with my Excel journey. I didn't find Tableau until I want to say 2017, when like Dustin Cabral and Joe Marino came into Keurig at the time, helped Keurig stand up Tableau. Cleartelligence was a great implementation partner for us. And that's how I learned Tableau. Was Dustin had built a dashboard for us, and I just dissected his dashboard, picked it apart, tried to make my own little improvements and tweaks. So I got to learn just by seeing what others had done in Tableau. So I wasn't starting from a blank slate. So
Yeah, I feel like that's really the best way to learn, right? Is get in there and take something that you know and understand, and then reverse engineer it, or just try to take ownership of it.
absolutely. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about like requirements gathering process. So one of like the key roles that we play as analysts is being able to talk to business stakeholders. And one of the key roles that we play as consultants is being able to do this across industries, and just like walk into a new company, a new industry we've never worked in before, and figure out exactly what they need. So do you have an approach or any type of framework that you do for that type of requirements gathering?
I do. I don't have like a specific script that I follow. I don't think that that tends to work well, but I do have an approach that I follow everywhere, which is really, um, some of the time we are given a kind of problem or an ask that it needs to be solved, and sometimes we're getting these very specific, somebody has already tried to solve the problem and just needs somebody to do it. Either way, I get the requirements, I still am always going to step back and say, what is the need? Why is it needed? Right? What are you doing today? How is this going to make it better? How do you know what is working? And, what are those like handful of metrics that are going to tell you whether you're successful or not? And getting people to come back up to that 10,000-foot view, because I don't think that a prescriptive approach and just building it usually lands as well as
Absolutely.
people do.
Absolutely.
And then I start to get into the technical. Okay, what fields answer these questions, and is there a field that answers these questions? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of, is there a
Curious.
field? Oh, say again?
I'm curious what your approach is. I know we've worked together, but
Yeah. So it varies. It depends if it's like an executive level dashboard or executive level requirements versus like very specific like department level. So from an executive level standpoint, I like to get what is that handful of KPIs that they're really after, kind of what keeps them up at night, and how do we keep the dashboard as small as possible with as few KPIs as possible to help them really drive the business. So I'm really thinking from trying to make the box smaller and smaller and smaller to really drive home what's important to them. Um, from business specific standpoint, like let's say if I'm going to be doing a requirement for like a purchasing department or some like supply chain type thing, I like to sit down with the users and have them show me a day in the life of like how they're doing it today. That way I get to see what's their ERP system like. I get to see what are all the manual steps. I let them complain about their current process so I can just note all the pain points, and kind of go from there.
Yeah,
Um,
that's very like that's I love to do that. That's very user experience research kind of techniques too, right? Like the users are going to skim right over some of these challenges because they didn't even think about it. But if you sit there and watch them work, you'll pick up on so much more that makes what you build better.
Yes. One of the things that I learned going through the SAP implementation at Keurig way back in the day is that business users, including myself at the time, were really bad at giving requirements. I think the first time where I ever heard the term requirements gathering was through that SAP implementation, which lasted from like, I want to say like 2014 until the time I left there in 2017, or maybe it was even longer than that. I'm not sure. But what I noticed about myself being self-critical is that when they were asking me for requirements on specific reports, I definitely didn't give them enough information. And then when I realized that the product that the SAP team delivered that didn't solve my requirement at all, looking back on myself saying, well, I didn't really give them the requirement. I quickly got much better at understanding that and then help other people like coach me through their requirements basically.
Yep.
So I think just learning from your shortcomings is just another big thing, and just understanding that business people aren't used to explaining their requirements and really just hand holding them and getting it out of them.
Yeah, yeah. And we're like this, as consultants and as analysts, we're kind of this bridge between the technical and the people who are just trying to do their work, and don't know how to articulate the technical pieces of it. So yeah, that's a
Absolutely.
big piece. Clean it out.
So it looks like we got 8 people live on LinkedIn. Could someone just put a comment so I can make sure they're flowing through to the streaming app? Says I just put a test comment in LinkedIn and it didn't flow through here to our streaming app. So I'm just concerned if we're not getting the comments and questions on the fly here. Hopefully we are. I mean, hopefully there is a mechanism for them to ask us their questions. We did see some comments coming from YouTube. We're kind of streaming to 2 platforms at once. Okay. Thank you, David. Comments rock. All right. So I'll keep asking now that we know that the comments are flowing through and I don't have to be concerned about that. I'm going to stop looking at my phone. I'll ask a few more questions for Jacqui and then we're going to start just hopefully, audience questions will start flowing in here. Um, so like what are some common problems that you see with dashboards in general?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of it comes down to what we were just talking about, right? With poorly given or poorly gathered requirements. Not necessarily because anybody did anything wrong, but because there wasn't a complete understanding of what was trying to be served, or we're trying to serve too many people at once. So that like one size fits all, fits none problem, because it's trying to be too much. It's too hard to understand. It's too big. It's too slow. I think that's one of the big areas where a lot of things fall down, or don't get used, or
So
being
one of the
really thorough
things,
with requirements and delivering what you've been asked for.
totally.
Then it's a dead end because no, we didn't anticipate the follow-up question.
So one of the things that you mentioned there is it's too slow, which is one of the common things that I come across, where dashboards are so fancy, basically, that they become slow. Tell us tell us about any experience you have about like coming into a dashboard that's too slow and what you did to help speed it up.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. That's like, kind of the cop out consultant line, but it's also really
Yeah,
true,
I
right?
love it. It
Um,
depends.
yeah, it's, it can be due to the volume of data where, maybe we've been asked to provide reporting that goes down to the weekly level, but nobody's actually looking at that. They're looking at it quarterly. And so can we make the data smaller? Can we reduce the number of fields? Can we use interactivity instead of filters? Because each filter is kind of essentially a subquery. So if you're putting filters on that have long lists of values, that's going to be slow. Is it the data model, or can anything be pushed back to the data model?
Totally. Yeah,
Is it
pushing
all
calculations back to the
fancy
database.
calculations, or interactivity parameters? Anything like that. It really depends on the circumstances and what's needed. Sometimes it's aggregating the data and putting things back into the data model to have the calculations performed there, so it's not happening while the user waits. And sometimes it goes back to, right, this dashboard is trying to serve too many purposes. Do we have like an executive roll-up dashboard and then somebody's operational dashboard where they can go in and investigate more deeply? Maybe that person is willing to wait longer, to get more information and be able to answer more questions. But the executive is going to get frustrated if they have to wait more than a couple of seconds for it to load, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's some like detailed business process dashboards where they're expecting it to take a little bit because they're asking for some raw data. One of the things I always like to do is if they want raw data to put it as like a jump to link. So it's behind a filter basically. So like, oh, you're filtering to a week or you're filtering to a product type or a product category. You're going to click on that. Let's just call it product category and then jump to the details. So it's not just dumping all the raw data from the database.
right, yeah, it's
Um,
the detail on demand rather than
exactly.
putting it out there for everybody to sit and wait for.
Exactly. The situations that are that I like to troubleshoot is when the raw data source itself is fast, but the dashboard is slow. And then so what you have to do is like if you connect with a blank worksheet and you drag and drop one field and it comes back right away, and drag and drop 5 fields and it comes back right away, but then the dashboard itself is dragging. That's actually a really fun troubleshooting project, if you will, because you really have to rebuild the dashboard from scratch is my approach, and notice where it becomes slow. Oftentimes it's a particular calculation. Oftentimes it's just too much stuff on the dashboard. It's always something different. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever use the performance recorder in Tableau to see which sheets are causing problems or
Yes, the Tableau performance recorder is a great one. I actually wish Tableau made apparent more easily what the SQL queries that are running beside, like if you didn't have to use the performance recorder, like some of the more like modern, like web-based BI tools that I've seen, every tile you can kind of click on it and see the SQL query for that tile, which is like really cool. Um,
yeah.
so performance recorder is great. And now that I'm almost 100% in Snowflake, um, every query that Tableau is kicking off over to Snowflake can be seen in the Snowflake query history. So a dashboard loading, you might see like a couple hundred queries in Snowflake because every drop-down filter is a query.
Yep.
A lot of like connection, it does a lot of temporary tables. So like one dashboard could easily create 100, 150 queries in Snowflake really quick and easy to find. What's the one that ran for 45 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes? Analyze the query
Yep.
profile on there. And oftentimes what you'll find is that level of detail calculation is the thing that made the dashboard slow. And then you say, oh, well, this is a fixed LOD. We could do that in the database instead. And then boom, you have your answer right there. So that's
Yep.
been cool.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
see
Or
if we
does
can
the
get
logical model solve these problems? Yeah.
let me see if I could take a second to read this question. Statement of work acceptance criteria for dashboard development. Like, how do you prevent a customer from holding up payment if they ask for 100 minor revisions? Yeah, so this really matters when you're going with like fixed price versus hourly. Fixed price
Mhm.
on dashboards or like website development, which is never done, is really hard. But let me just read the last part. In the past, I've told customers I'll work on dashboard dev up to a max of X hours. They didn't balk, but I want to know others besides. So, um, Jacqui, have you been in the role of writing statements of work and doing those types of estimates? Um,
Um, is- so the principals do write the SOWs. I've been part of the kind of pre-sales discovery process to write up what that scope might look like, but I'm less involved in the final
okay.
SOW.
And I'm not sure if this is true across the board, but I know a lot of stuff is time and materials. So you kind of guess the number of hours and kind of hope for the best. What I do when I'm doing fixed price dashboards, usually it'll be like a 90-day plan, and it'll include, standing up new data infrastructure like, Snowflake. We're going to be doing DBT and one dashboard. I make sure that I call the dashboard a minimum viable product. I make sure that I communicate the value the dashboard will bring. So we'll really understand the business problem up front. I'll and in the statement of work, I'll be saying, here's the value that we're going to deliver to your business. And the dashboard will deliver that, assuming that the data realities are like can facilitate that. Because you always want to caveat, like, I haven't seen your data yet. Assuming you have data that will answer your question, this is what we're going to do. Um, But I think by calling it a minimum viable product, but then letting them know it's not going to be a piece of junk, it's going to answer your question, but like we're not going to go back and forth on font size. We're not going back and forth on color and like this. Can you change the shade of green by 3% and stuff like that? In a fixed price project, you have to make sure that you're not going back and forth on that. And then another thing that I like for David's question on statements of work is um, what is it called? Like a support retainer model afterwards, which will be a fraction of whatever your monthly fee is. So you say like $2,000 a month gets you support on this dashboard. So that would include, hey, change the font size, change the font color, all that other stuff that they're never done with. And that way you can avoid counting hours that way, kind of a win-win situation.
Yeah, I think to add to that too, when I first start an engagement, right during that discovery process, I'm going to lay out like we're going to gather requirements. I'm going to create that requirements in the design spec that says this is the solution that I'm going to build, right? And then when the development is done, that's done, and then it goes to user testing, and I time box that to a week or 2 weeks, and they enter their feedback in a spreadsheet. And when the UAT is done, then it's just they confirm it whether I fixed what they reported, but it keeps that from it going on forever and ever and ever, because it certainly can. And then wireframing throughout the process so that they can tell you that that's not our green on a picture that you drew, instead of something that's going to
Yeah.
take a lot more time to update.
What tool do you like for wireframing?
I love Figma. It's a
Figma?
really nice tool. Yeah.
I never got truly up to speed on Figma. I messed around with it and it was always like, oh, this is the thing I have to learn. I've done, of course, PowerPoint. I think a lot of us started wireframing in PowerPoint. And I'm just checking my favorites folder here because there's another one, Excalidraw. Joshua March turned me on to Excalidraw, which is like just a stupid simple interface. It's like you could draw rectangle, circles, and lines, and like there's like 2 fonts to pick from. So it's not like wireframing to the exact, here's how the fonts are going to look, but it's here's the layout of your dashboard. You got tiles across the top, maybe a big line chart here and some bar charts below. Like you can easily represent that in like 3 minutes in
Yeah.
Excalidraw. I've had
Like, you just need a simple picture sometimes to help convey it to somebody who doesn't think about charts all day. What this
yeah,
will look like, and you can start to have better conversations. Sometimes you
totally.
need a tool like Figma because you really need to like thoroughly prototype this whole thing out. Like I just went through a project where I was developing the Tableau dashboards alongside the development of an application. There was no data. It was all developed in Figma. We went through all this whole process in Figma, and then I just built it in Tableau.
Nice.
So
Nice.
it's, I guess, the right tool for the right job.
Totally. So we have a generative AI question here. So with Gen AI and users being able to interact directly with data through LLMs, how are dashboards still relevant? You want to take a stab at this one first?
Yeah, I mean, this is the question that I think a lot of people, including dashboard designers, are asking. I would check out, and we can like share the link after, I think. Amanda Malik, the executive director of the Data Visualization Society, gave a great talk at the last Chart Champ, and then she recorded it. It addresses it way better than I ever will. But I guess my short answer is like interacting with the data directly through these language models is really about answering specific questions quickly. So you can go in and start to have a conversation with a specific subset of the data. However, that is never going to substitute for a place where you can see a well-designed dashboard is going to be able to tell you these are the areas of your business that are on or off track and why, so that you can start to delve in. And that might be the extent of it, is to say, our sales have gone down. Sales have gone down in this region more than in any other region. And then maybe that's the point where you go to your LLM and start asking questions. What are the biggest customer changes and things like that? Like I think
Yeah.
they worked together, right? Just like your dashboard in your car didn't go away when your car got smart. You still need to be able to see that stuff, right?
Yeah. So there's a few different directions I'd like to take this question in. One of them is just like, I haven't really seen like a BI tool that does the LLM thing like really that great. Like if you ask it a sufficiently complicated question, the answer is just really not that great. Right now, I think LLMs are really good at asking or answering questions that involve a single table. But as soon as it's involving like joins and specific like ways to join, for questions that you're going to repeat, you could kind of pre-train it and say, hey, if I'm asking you to compare forecast versus actuals, I want you to union the two. And then like you could tell it kind of what to do, but usually it's going to give you the wrong answer a bunch of times. And you have to go back and train it on the SQL that you basically want it to do for you. The other thing is
Yeah,
like,
and
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Okay,
I was
I was
gonna
gonna
say, I've
say the
never
other.
met a data set clean enough to not have a human look at it.
Exactly. And oftentimes, like our data modeling process is so long. Like when you compile like all the in DBT speak, like models that sit on top of models that sit on top of models, which could be thousands of lines of code when it's all said and done to come up with the final thing that's feeding the dashboard. I don't think that we're close to AI being able to kind of do all of that for us. So certainly, if we're feeding it a finished product and a semantic layer, it's going to have a much better chance at answering your questions through querying the semantic layer, where it has like kind of field names, other things you might call that field. Like if you could teach the AI, like, oh, if someone says revenue and or someone says sales, that kind of means the same thing. Like give them the column that says like revenue. But there's so much coaching and like pre-training that you have to do on the AI right now. I haven't seen like a super impressive demo of like AI answering BI questions yet. So
No, I don't think it's there yet. You know, Tableau Pulse is going to start rolling out, if it hasn't already, and like that again is sitting on top of an already modeled data set, and you can provide that context, right? There's still a human involved in coaching what the terminology is of like a specific company or organization and what fields mean what. So
totally.
I don't think we're going anywhere quite yet.
I don't think we're going anywhere quite yet. Eventually, you might be able to log into Snowflake and just type a question, and boom, it's going to draw a Streamlit app that's interactive for you. But I think we're at least 10 years from that. But who knows? ChatGPT blew us all away when it came out in December of 2022, and it was like a giant leap. So maybe there's going to be more leaps equally as giant in the coming years. But right now, I'm not seeing anything that's like, oh, that's going to replace us. So here's a question coming in from Africa. So any comments for a junior data engineer looking to work remotely from Africa? I'll take a stab at this, Jacqui, and then maybe you can add. So I think for a junior data engineer or analyst, it doesn't matter. Junior any role, building a portfolio is really great. So if you're a data engineer, it's your GitHub profile with some sample projects on what you've done. And if you're trying to get into the Tableau space or Power BI space, like I'll just say Tableau because it's easier to talk about. Tableau Public, just building a portfolio on Tableau Public is really great. And I've seen companies when they've post job openings say, send us your resume or your Tableau Public profile and we'll set up an interview. So it's like people don't even care anymore what your resume experience is if you can really do the job. They don't care where you went to college or what your GPA was. So that public profile, I think, is really my best advice for a junior analyst or engineer.
Yeah, I completely agree. Is get a GitHub, get a Tableau public profile, show it, have fun with it. Go out and find some of these many amazing public data sets that are shared in like different community projects. Whether you're using Tableau or not, you could still use data from a Tableau community project to do something cool in Python in your GitHub profile, right? Just do the
Totally.
work and show it to people and put it out there.
Yeah. Let's see here. We got a couple more questions coming in. So this question is asking about, data viz types outside of the normal. So plots other than line charts, bar charts, pie charts, how often are you using that stuff in the dashboard? Kind of the fancy stuff.
Very occasionally. Is there a real use case for it? I mean, like very occasionally, but there was one data set that we just did for real world fake data. There was like, man, a Sankey chart is really the best way to show this, right?
Yeah,
But most of the time, what we really need is the lines to tell a story over time, the bar to tell us volume and magnitude, and then the KPIs to tell us whether things are improving or not.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm a if you look at my dashboards, they're almost all follow the same pattern. KPI tiles across the top, a line chart right below that. And underneath the line chart is my sorted bar charts, always the horizontal bars with the biggest thing on top. So it's sorted. That way you can real quickly look at the top couple and know really what's driving the result. Um, so
And
this
Tablau's done great eye tracking studies, so you can read about it, like that prove out that's what people are going to be able to follow most easily as well.
So tell us a little bit about I can't remember the name of like the blog series, but I think your husband does a blog series on like useless stuff you can do in Tableau, or like what, can you just
Yeah,
mention that?
totally useless charts and how to build them.
Totally useless
Um,
charts and how to
yeah, yeah. If you look at Brian's Tableau public profile, he has some of these really crazy looking charts. See if I can share my screen on here.
Yeah.
No, that's not it. This one. So this, right, is
Hold on one second. Let me see if I can. It's not presenting, at least as far as I can tell.
okay, let's see. There we go. Now,
Oh, okay. I have to add it to the stage. Okay, there we go. Boom. Yes, we
all
can see
right.
it.
So this is just like one example of his work, right? Where he's got these ancient mythologies with the whole genealogy of the different gods of all of these, the Greek pantheon, the Norse, and the Egyptians. It's interactive. You can click on, you could click on a particular god and see like who they're related to. And I think I like lost my Tableau public connection here. Let's see. Yeah, it says reconnect.
Are the
Okay.
lines drawn in Tableau as well?
He draws everything down to his borders and backgrounds in Tableau. But yeah, like this is arguably like you would never use a chart like this in a visualization for a client. But even so, this totally useless chart is he's been able to take what he learned in implementing this and use it for real client problems of solving these issues of hierarchies and things
Interesting.
like that. So that's
Interesting.
kind of the story of the that's really kind of the story of the totally useless charts is really this kind of learning process that goes into them that is then applicable to real use cases.
Yeah. But I would say for most people, conventional wisdom, 95+% of the time use those conventional chart types. So let's see, we
Yes.
have a bunch more questions coming in here. So is there any clear path to break into data engineering considering the hundreds of tools in the discipline? Um, so I think kind of similar to like what we mentioned before about just having that profile. I would say it's less, so data engineering is going to be less about tools and more about concepts. So for data engineering, you just want to learn SQL. It doesn't matter if you learn Snowflake or Redshift or Postgres or Microsoft SQL Server. Just pick one and learn that flavor of SQL, and then try another one and learn the differences between the SQL in, let's say, SQL Server versus MySQL. And you'll see the differences are really small, and it only takes your mind like a week to go back and forth between one or the other. And then once you've done that once and you're like, okay, I spent 3 months learning SQL Server and then it took me only a week to learn MySQL, then you have the confidence to then go to the next database and say, like, I know SQL. And
Yeah.
then again, for data engineering, Python. I mean, Python's required less and less these days because a lot of tools are just solving the problems that we used to solve with Python. Like I no longer recommend that people use Python to extract and load data to the database. You should look for what tools exist that can extract and load that data to the database. That way you're not writing custom code. But a lot of these modern tools are baking Python right into the tool. So that's really good to know. But I would say don't worry so much about what exact tool you're using. Learn the concepts, not just SQL, but like also like what about like data normalization? Like what does that even mean? Um,
Yeah.
Go to Kimball's website. Let me see if I can get this up here. Anything to add to that while I'm
Yeah, it's just picking something to learn, finding something to practice on that is actually going to bake that into your brain a little bit better than maybe just going through a course would. And just doing it. And it's like Jeff said, it's really all about the concepts. So you're learning how different database structures work and how to write the queries, and then it's all transferable. And if you learn on SQL Server and then now you need to go to Oracle, right? You can even just Google the differences in the syntax, right? Like once you know how it works, that's really it.
totally? So I just want to call out this website here for learning concepts about data modeling. So this is really great because you could read through this entire thing in an hour or two, where it starts you from the very beginning, and each thing is like one paragraph. Each hyperlink is one paragraph. So here's what you think about in business requirements gathering. And then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about collaborating grain. Okay, what does grain of data mean? That's a concept I've never heard of before. So now it tells you very quickly declaring the grain is a pivotal step, and then blah blah blah. You read it, but this website is just like amazing. If you can just learn to like parrot what it says in this website in front of a customer, you're gonna look like you really know what you're talking about. And it's not just, of course, getting this under your belt, really under your fingertips, practicing it is going to be a lot better than parroting it. But you start somewhere. So where do I stop sharing? Stop screen. Cool. So that's a good resource for you. And just in case you couldn't see it, it's kimballgroup.com, kimballgroup.com. Is a great place to learn about data modeling. Got tons more questions here. Let's see this one here. Requirements for a fresh graduate of data engineering role for resume interview. So projects. So I'm not sure if you, through your data engineering program, if they did projects, but project work is great. I recently got to read a bunch of resumes from people in the data science or data engineering program at BU at the Chart Champ event. It's a particular school name. I can't remember. It's like BU School of something data. But all through that program, all of the students had like really good project work. That was like, I was like, wow, like you have tons of experience for someone who's never had a job before. It was very impressive. So if you don't have that experience, like actual project work on your resume, just find a project online, go on YouTube and type in data engineering project and just do one of them, put it on your GitHub. What else does it say? Good at DSA.
Yes.
Some say good at SQL.
Cloud and data warehouse. Yeah, again, this kind of goes back to that, like the concepts are the same, right? Learn SQL and learn what like cloud and on-prem mean enough to speak about it in an educated way. And like but it's really about knowing SQL and those concepts.
Okay, this one, I'd like to take this one first. So never move data from Google Sheets to ERP unless you don't already have an ERP system, and maybe if your business was run on spreadsheets to begin with and you're migrating to an ERP. But if you're up and running an ERP, I don't think that the spreadsheet data belongs in there. You should move your ERP data to a data warehouse and then move your Google Sheets data to the data warehouse and combine your Google Sheets data with your ERP data inside your data warehouse. But like, don't load extraneous data to your ERP system that's not required for your ERP. Like if you want to compare sales against weather, don't load weather data to your ERP. It doesn't belong there. Compare sales against weather in your data warehouse.
Yeah, yeah. Like, right. We don't want to duplicate data that exists in one place to another if it's avoidable, besides into a data warehouse where that is meant to happen. And then second, I mean, I just wrote a blog post all about like Excel and Google Sheets data sources. Does that have a place that it should live, and how do we get that in there and not bake a Google Sheet into our process at all? Sometimes it's
Yeah.
unavoidable.
And
But it's a question that I always try to ask.
and when it's unavoidable, it's okay for Google Sheets to be a source of data into the data warehouse, but just use a tool then to load it and keep it up to date. So like there's tools like Airbyte, there's Fivetran, there's Portable, there's tons of different data loaders that will connect to any data source really and load it to many different targets. So instead of coming up with a Python process to load that Google Sheets data into your warehouse, use a tool. I mean, start with Airbyte because it's open source. You could do it on your laptop, install it for free. It's a good free way to get started. Let's see. Another AI question. I think we kind of covered our perspective here. Text or speech input versus dashboarding. Yeah, I think we covered that. I think Jacqui and I both feel like we're still human in the loop is necessary at this point because the AI isn't quite good enough yet on complicated questions. Let's see what this says here. Do you suggest first work on data analysis visualization before data engineering? Okay, so you want to take this one first, Jacqui, and then I'll answer from my perspective.
I don't think it matters as long as it's what side of it you're interested in enough to keep going and keep learning. I came into it from the visualization side, and I, that was my entrance into the world of data and learning all about how data engineering and data architecture works through that, because that was my language. I'm a visual person. But there are plenty of people who have gone the other way around.
Yeah. So one thing I'll add here is I think some really great data engineers were business analysts first, because it comes back to that whole like requirements thing of like when you spend 2 years as an analyst, then you have in your head like what you want to see about that business, and it's like very clear about like, hey, we need the data to do XYZ. If you just start on the data engineering side, you're always looking for people to kind of spoon feed you those requirements and what you want to do. So there is benefit to gaining some analytics experience, but hey, if you just want to be a coder and you just want to do the data engineering work and that's what's really attractive to you, you don't need to start on the visualization side, but there might be some benefit of making yourself a more valuable resource by starting on the analyst side, and then transitioning over.
Yeah, and I think it's really helpful to it makes you a more holistic analytics practitioner, regardless of what your focus is, to understand both. Because sometimes somebody who's really strictly focused on data engineering isn't going to understand as much how that data is going to be used or needs to be prepared in order to be served up for analytics. And maybe somebody who is too focused just on the dashboard and display side isn't going to understand enough about the modeling and the performance implications of certain decisions. So it's like knowing both, but picking a focus is, I think, probably not going to fail you.
Totally. So here we got another question. So Dave was the one that asked us about the statement of work before, and he was just following up, thanking us for that, and then asking us about in Power BI direct query versus import. I'll flip it to a Tableau question with similar concepts. So extract versus live connection, to use Tableau speak. What are your recommendations on extract versus live connection in Tableau? And if you have specific Power BI experience, feel free to answer the question he asked as well. But
I've done less like performance benchmarking type thing in Power BI, but as far as like whether to use live or extracted data in your analytics platform, it depends. You don't want to be hitting your databases, especially if you're on one that has compute costs, live when the data only loads once a month or once a week or once a day. They don't need to be requerying that every time, and that could have performance implications. So an extract is going to be more suitable. It's usually optimized to whatever tool it's going into, right? So like Tableau has the hyper database that is optimized for use with their rendering. So you'll usually get performance gains out of it. However, there are live needs where the real-time data is truly what is needed, and then that's what you do. You connect live and you optimize the performance of your queries and your dashboards as much as you can to support the live connection. And there are cases where it will be faster because the database can sometimes compute faster than than Tableau is going to, or Power BI is going to.
that's right. So I will speak from a perspective of Snowflake specifically. So Jacqui mentioned kind of cost per query, or if you have a live connection, you could be running up your database costs. That is especially true in Snowflake, where my recommendation is always extract the data from Snowflake, so it's a once a day refresh or whatever that minimum is. So you're only running that query hopefully once a day instead of every time someone drags and drops. But you get to a tipping point where the data is just too big to fit in a Tableau extract. Like if it's Tableau Cloud, it has a 2-hour timeout. I think Tableau Server might be a little bit more configurable than that. But if your data is so big that it's like approaching 2 hours to extract, now you just throw on a live connection, because it actually might and probably will be faster than the extract will be. So data. So I was going to try and speak in rows, and then I realized it also matters how many columns you have. But some Tableau extract is really, really great for like 10 million rows or smaller. I've even seen 50 million rows do really good in a Tableau extract. It's actually very impressive that it can just chew that much data. But once you
If you're
get to
using a table instead of a wide table, Tableau can handle billions of rows, surprisingly quickly. So yeah, it's just about the amount of data.
it's data size for sure. But yeah, David, hope that helps answer your question. I would always start with an extract and graduate to a live connection if you need to, especially if your database is charging you per query or per usage. Let's see, we got another one here. I like Jeff's comment about capturing pain points and becoming a business analyst. What are some of the biggest pain points you face when working with companies with very amateur data infrastructure? So I would say at least 60% of the places I've consulted have had completely amateur data infrastructure, like either no data infrastructure or just very spreadsheet focused. But Jacqui, do you want to take the first stab at this question and I'll follow up again? Or
I mean, yeah, I think the biggest pain points is really about people more than the data, right? You need to get buy-in that they need to invest in these things and to invest in doing it right, and to show them the value of analytics, and that this sometimes to do it right is going to be slower or more expensive. I think that's the biggest challenge if somebody is very early in their analytics journey as a company, that they don't have that culture where they've all agreed that this is worth investing in, and nobody knows how to use any of it.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it does seem to come down to like people and process more than tools usually, right? We always talk about people, process, and tools you could pick from. You want to have the right tools. I don't want to underemphasize tools, but When it comes to some pain points and problems, people and process is always a huge part of it, and coaching them into new processes. Um,
The best
even
tools will fail if the people aren't on board.
yeah, yeah. I I read someone was making a joke on LinkedIn about DBT creating spaghetti, and I kind of just laughed because I was like, well, what tool doesn't create spaghetti when you put it in the hands of the people who create the spaghetti, right? Like I've seen Alteryx workflows that are just like make your skin crawl. That it literally looks like a pile of spaghetti on the screen. You're just like, I don't know what's happening here. But yeah, it's not always about what's going on with the tool specifically. So I think he has a follow-up. To be precise, I'm talking about mid-sized manufacturing companies. Most boating industry fall into this category. That don't have a robust data team. Yeah. So one thing I'll say here is that for if you're into like the data space on LinkedIn or Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, you might think that every company has like this big data infrastructure, but the fact is most companies don't. Like if you
Yeah,
just go to the grocery store and just look at all the products on the shelf, like 80% of them have no idea like what they're doing data wise. Like the big companies do, like your cereal box from General Mills, I'm sure they're doing great data wise. Some of your
maybe.
bigger
I'll
brands, but
probably see using some pretty some spreadsheets somewhere.
yeah.
Some, yeah, but
Uh,
yeah,
so Streetcar is completely right that most companies out there are just kind of floundering, which is why this is a great time to be a data and analytics consultant, because you could provide so much value and help so many different companies and make a huge
yeah.
impact.
And that's also like, right, that's the value proposition of some of these low code, no code tools. Whether you're looking at things like, Tableau, Alteryx, Tableau Prep, right, where you're visually going through these, you kind of learn that technical language without having to be a coder. It's less intimidating. Um, so like that's where those really come into play too, I think.
Cool. So I had one question for you, Jacqui. So Andy Kriebel, who's a very famous like YouTuber for Tableau and very kind of LinkedIn famous as well, he's been talking a lot on LinkedIn recently about using dashboard templates. So going out to Tableau Public, find a dashboard that you really like, download that dashboard, use it as a template, like put your own data basically in someone else's dashboard and make the tweaks. Have you had any success with that approach? It's not something I've actually tried. I've always gone ground up. I'm wondering if you've tried that before.
I I don't. Yeah, I've never been a user of templates per se. More of a user of like recipes, right? Like how we earlier in this conversation, like, I'm gonna have my KPIs across the top, and then I'm gonna have my overtime view and some my like sorted bar. Right, there's kind of a language to the dashboard and then a language to specific areas, right? Sales has certain things that they're interested in. If you're looking at surveys, there's, certain metrics and certain styles that are expected. Like it's more that than templates to me. However, I will save a workbook that has, you know, all of the logos and titles and my containers where I'm going to put my filters, those types of things, my fonts, saving color palettes, because
So for one
those can be
company, you build a
time
template.
consuming. Hmm.
So for one
Sorry,
company, you'll build a template that's like their brand template, but it's not a
kind of like a
template that you're going to
starter
bring.
style guide, or sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying like, these charts go here, or even laying out the whole thing, just putting those basic, design objects and assets just together so I don't have to go out and add the images every time, change the colors every time. I will do that. I have not used templates, so I can't say how well it
Okay, cool.
works.
Well, I really loved what you said about using recipes instead of templates. I just feel like that's such a great way to say it, and to think about it. And yeah, I think that is basically what I do. I follow a recipe where if it's a sales dashboard or an inventory dashboard, I basically have that recipe in mind of what I want that dashboard to look like. A forecast accuracy dashboard is usually going to do the same thing every time. If it's like
Mhm.
I'm really big into supply chain, like physical products, manufacturing, and like resource planning. So I think about stuff like that all the time. But like if it's going to be like purchase order shortages, I have kind of something in mind that of what that might be. HR dashboards, of course, is going to be very much different. Um, so I did miss a question here. What are your views on using Streamlit instead of Tableau for dashboard pros and cons? Are you familiar with Streamlits at all, Jacqui?
I haven't used it. I can't say pros and cons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Streamlit is like a Python framework to create dashboards, or it's like a quick little web app that you could spin up that has charts in it. So my personal view is I would never write code to draw a chart. And I know there are people out there that love that and make a living doing it. I don't think that there's anything wrong with it, but I would rather use a tool to draw the charts than writing like a Python snippet that's going to say draw the chart for me. Streamlit's cool because it's open source. Snowflake now actually owns Streamlit. They like purchased the company, the brand. So you can now build Streamlit dashboards right inside of Snowflake. So I'd say that there is you're hugely valuable if you know Streamlit very well, and you could put like a Snowflake Streamlit dashboard on your resume or your profile, like your portfolio. um, I would think that would be very attractive to a lot of companies, but I would much rather embed a Tableau dashboard or any other like tool drag and drop dashboard personally. Thanks, Rohan, for the question. Sorry, I missed it up there. I think we're out of audience questions, so I'll ask you one last question. We could wrap it up here. Actually, you know what? I think this is a great place to wrap it up. So if there's no other questions from the audience, Jacqui, thank you very much for your time. This has been a blast. Oh, we did get one last question come in at the last wire here at the end. Let's see. It says, "Can you see the questions before I put them up on the screen, Jacqui, in your thing?" Okay.
Yes.
What does USP mean? Can you put what USP is in the chat for me? Okay. So the people who are getting experience at FANG companies are just getting this next level experience working with big data, software engineering best practices, stuff that I never had really the benefit of getting exposed to. I think if you're self-taught on smaller data and kind of just gleaning from others on best practices, you can go a long way doing that. But I think that working at a FANG company really does differentiate you. Of course, really hard to get in the door there. Unique selling point is USP. Yes, I would say it is true that working at FANG, it makes you extremely marketable. But I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be your goal because they're famous for burning people out, low quality of life, and like just I don't know. Do you have any opinions on that, Jacqui?
Yeah, I mean, that if you can take that opportunity and working your butt off like that to earn that is in your path, then go for it. But I don't
Yeah.
think you have to. And then maybe that's, I came into this before there were really, I'm gonna date myself so bad. There
Yeah.
weren't majors in data science or data
Me
analytics or
too.
data
They
visualization.
didn't even have data engineering
Made
job
this
title when I started.
stuff
Yeah.
up. So yeah, I mean, and as far as like unique selling point, I've never really thought too hard about. I think I going back to building a profile and a portfolio on public areas like Tableau, public social media, and just being out there and being authentic and learning from other people and sharing with other people, and like you will inevitably build these relationships that will get you in the door as well. And it's a product of making these connections and friendships and learning. So it doesn't have to feel icky.
Absolutely. Well, Jacqui, we're at time here. Thank you so much. This has been really fun. I cannot believe an hour passed by already. Now I really do see why some podcasts are like 3 hours long because the time has really flown so fast here. But this has been fun, and thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.